If you think you can cross a vast ocean, prey on the innocent, run and hide. Sow your wild oats in foreign lands, leaving broken hearts trembling in your wake. You'd better watch out, your day will come. The reckoning has begun for what you've done. There's a knock coming to your door, justice won't forget, that's for sure. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Professor MacLeod is leading the fight, bringing shadows into the light. No more hiding, no more lies, we hear their cry. Attorneys knocking on your door tonight. I've got news for you, turns out you have a child. I'm their lawyer, time to settle what's been overdue. It could happen now or in decades to come. Maybe when you're 80, thinking you're fine. But the truth comes out, your kids at home will learn you escaped what predators should pay. Option 2, our lives you won't claim. In charity's name or uniform pride. Predatorious, no second thought, no backward glance. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Professor MacLeod is leading the fight, bringing shadows into the light. No more hiding, no more lies, we hear their cries. Every child deserves to know where they're from, their roots, their home. We will not be silenced anymore. We're standing up, we're keeping score. No cover-ups, no looking the other way. For the women and children left behind. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Join the cause, join the fight. We're bringing justice into the light. Your reckoning will arrive. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their calling. You can't hide. The truth will find you. Fine white. We hear their cries. We listen to their cries.
Live on the air, it's Trial Junkies United with your host, Z.
Greetings, my truth seekers and justice warriors. I'm Z, your storyteller, in the fight against injustice with my ride or die Doc riding shotgun as we navigate the darkness where the predators lurk and the system fails. We're here to shed light on the stories society would rather keep buried. So buckle up. The road ahead becomes rough as we guide you through another chapter of this nightmare we call the justice system. Welcome back to the Trial Junkies United. I'm Z, and we're excited to bring part 2 of our incredible conversation with Professor Andrew MacLeod. Doc, you ready for part 2?
Yes, he is.
You never know when Yoda might pop in. Thank you, Doc. So let me tell you, having this conversation, it wasn't just a privilege, it was an honor, an absolute honor. Professor MacLeod's work with Hear Their Cries is nothing short of heroic. But in this episode, we went beyond his mission. And we delved into some other topics a bit that affect us all. We explored the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Also, what does it really mean in today's justice system? We also got practical about something many of us wonder. If you want to donate to a charity overseas now, how can you be sure where your money is actually going? Especially when we're talking about protecting children from predators who deliberately put themselves in places where vulnerable kids are. Professor MacLeod introduced us to talking about the SAM insurance in a new way. And we know that's the sexual abuse and molestation policy that insurance companies are selling to churches and schools. And he gave me an entirely new perspective on that topic that I hadn't just, really considered before. So we discussed the experience of some of the Indigenous and Native communities here and in Australia. So there's a unique challenge they encounter within the system, but Doc and I walked away from this conversation with so much more to think about, and I know you will too. So let's go ahead and move on to part 2 of our interview with Professor MacLeod. Doc, roll that beautiful footage we had with Professor MacLeod. Quick introduction is we're talking with Professor Andrew MacLeod, and we're talking about the different subjects of trafficking and also just DNA for children that are finding themselves in a situation, whether it be by adoption or because their mother was trafficked and they don't know who their father is. So we're going to talk about some of the genealogy. So welcome, and we appreciate you talking with us, Professor MacLeod.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
I know we have a group of women here in the U.S. that have started an organization called WAR, which is Women Against...
That's what I was going to tell you. Yeah.
The Women Against the Sex Registry. Yeah. They said the sex registry is destroying families.
What's the sex registry?
The sex is for predators that have been caught, and then they have to go on the sex registry.
Yeah,
so
okay.
And these women are against it because they say it's dividing families. We had a case in Oklahoma. A woman had 3 kids. She knew this guy that she was a pen pal with. He was in prison over a child case, but she was writing him. And when he got out, they got married. Not only did he abuse her children, but they were coming up with another case that he had while he was still in prison where he had got a hold of a cell phone and was trying to abuse another girl. And this woman allowed her children to have friends over. And before he was to go to court, he deleted the entire family and those 2 little girls that were staying over after he had abused them. And then he deleted himself, but it's like, this is what happens when you want to say that the registry is wrong, because the parents of those 2 girls spending the night had no idea that he was a sex offender because he wasn't on the registry.
Look, you raise a number of issues. Like I think a sex offenders register is absolutely essential and people should be able to access it. And I think people who are a registered sex offender or convicted of sex offences should have a positive obligation to disclose that every time they have access to a child, in the private setting or the professional setting. So very, very clear on that. But there's another issue that's secondary to that, which is what we haven't wrapped our heads around in our communities now is, do we still believe in innocent until proven guilty? And if you take the case of Kevin Spacey, for example, everyone knows Kevin Spacey is a creep. Lost his career, lost his job. But every time he went to court, what happened?
Yeah, he got proved innocent.
He got proved innocent, or found not guilty is the technical
not
term.
Guilty.
So if we believe in innocent until proven guilty, what has Kevin Spacey been found guilty of? And he's been to courts in the UK and the United States. And each time he's found not guilty. Convicted in the court of public opinion, not convicted in the court of law. Now, we've got to figure this one out. One of the other cases I was involved in, and again, your listeners can Google this, the Rebecca Palmer case in the United Kingdom, and everything that I say is now public record. So this woman, Rebecca Palmer, accused her boyfriend of rape, and he was a Special Forces soldier in the UK. Squad mates believed the woman, which is what we're told in the community you should do now, beat her up a little bit. He's thrown in the brig. He then gets drummed out of the army, all while he's still suspected. His mother believed him that he didn't do it. His father believed the woman that he did. The mother and father divorced. That family totally fractured. A whole lot of evidence came out online that this guy had done things to other women who were saying he's done it to me as well. So we get to court, and then we find out that all the corroborating evidence from the other women saying he did it to me too all came from the same IP address. It was all fictional and all created.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the case against him was dismissed, and then unusually, the prosecutors took a case against Rebecca Palmer and accused her of perverting the course of justice because of the false accusation, and he ended up being convicted and going to jail for 5 years, which is a very long time for perverting the course of justice. And the judge, who was a female, and I'm glad it was a female judge, said, you have been a crime against the man, a crime against his family, because this family split up because of the false accusation, and that's a split that can never be rebuilt. This guy's lost his career, lost his future, but this woman has made it much easier for every man listening to a genuine victim of sexual exploitation and abuse to say, I don't believe you, because one false accuser actually harms every genuine victim of sexual exploitation and abuse.
Yes.
So we as a society have just got to come back a couple of steps and go, okay, Harvey Weinstein was a creep and he was convicted and he should go to jail.
Right.
Kevin Spacey had questionable behaviours, but every time he's gone to court, he's been found not guilty. But what happens when a totally innocent person is accused? Now, I'll tell you something that happened to me. So in these cases in the Philippines, one of the kids, we were able to find her biological father's Australian. So we dragged him to court, got a court order against him. With what's called the Declaration of Parentage, we were then able to go to Australia's Home Affairs Office and claim her citizenship by descent. We got it, and we got her an Australian passport. Now, this child was living in state care because the mother had attempted to sell the child into sex slavery. When the child told us, the mother was actually negotiating with a guy in Holland and a guy in Germany for this child's virginity price when she was 11. The mother was negotiating it.
Oh, Lord.
But this child was so clever, she screenshotted the chats between her mum and the guy in Germany and the guy in Holland, shared them with me that we were able to then report them back to law enforcement. And these two guys got free accommodation at the cost of the German and the Dutch taxpayer. Very smart kid. But now this kid has the opportunity of coming to Australia and maybe continuing her education with a foster family. So we bring her to Australia with her Australian passport. Wait for this. With a travel guardian from the Department of Social Welfare and Development.
Okay.
Staying in the home of a trusted female Australian journalist, with the written permission of the Ministry of Immigration in the Philippines, the Department of Social Welfare and Development in the Philippines, the personal knowledge of the Under-Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Philippines. The Philippines Consul General in Melbourne, Australia is told in advance, the Home Affairs Ministry is told in advance, and the personal knowledge of a former Prime Minister of Australia. Right?
Okay.
This kid has so much protection around her. Meanwhile, a friend of mine is going through a pretty nasty divorce, and his wife, or now ex-wife, is weaponizing all of his friendships against him. She makes a false complaint to the Department of Family, Fairness and Housing. Now, under the law in Victoria, anyone can make a child protection complaint if they have the reasonable belief that the child is at imminent risk of harm.
Okay.
So this woman makes a complaint against me that the child is at imminent risk of harm. I have child welfare investigators turn up to my house and they say, we're here about a child at imminent risk of harm in your custody and care. To which I say, there is no child in my custody and care. And they say, what about child M? And I say, well, child M is in the custody and care of a Department of Social Welfare and Development official staying in the home of this journalist. Look around my house, there's no evidence of a child being here. But we had to go through 3 days of brutal investigation including why were you never married? What's your sexuality? When did you lose your virginity? What would you describe your libido as?
Oh, my.
All because of a false accusation, and the Department of Family, Fairness and Housing will not even apologise for it.
See, and I think women that make false accusations should get whatever sentence the man would have got if it is proven that she lied, and
That's an interesting concept.
And he could go to jail for this for I don't care how many years. She should have to serve the sentence because she was willing to put him away.
Yeah, I said to this woman, Jennifer Sorrell from the Department of Family, Fairness and Housing, I said to her in her face, your approach, you've come in with a presumption of guilt. You know, I'm the middle-aged white guy. I must be the evil bastard, even though this child is protected by the Ministry of Immigration, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Consul General's known, a former Prime Minister knowns, and I never have unsupervised access with kids. Never. And that's for my protection. One of my cousins said to me when I was organising this child's visit, why is she travelling with a travel guardian? She's got you to protect her. I'm like, you misunderstand. The travel guardian's not for the child's protection. The travel guardian's for my protection.
Yeah.
It's to protect me against a false accusation. And even though this false accusation came from a woman as part of a divorce, the Jennifer Sorrell at the Department of Family, Fairness and Housing and Tris McCluskey will not even say, look, we got the report, we had to investigate it, we've seen that there's no risk, we're sorry we did that to you. They're not even human enough to just say, sorry. Yeah. And if they said to me, look, we had to act on it, but sorry, I would accept that. But they won't even say sorry, let alone the fact that this person who made the complaint, did they have the reasonable belief that the child was at imminent risk? Well, they knew the child was travelling with a travel guardian. They knew all the protection mechanisms around them. There's no way in hell this person thought the child was at imminent risk.
Right. Well, see, I'm a firm believer in if a child makes an accusation, if it's not a divorce case, I will normally take I will believe the child, because most children are not going to come out with an accusation unless perhaps a parent has put them up to it and there's a divorce situation. But even then, I want to see proof. But my first reaction is I will believe a child.
If the child's under the age of 12, that's absolutely my first response. 12 to 15, you've got to sit back and go, right, what's going on here? Because all children, male, female, are hormonal with puberty, and we've seen plenty of kids get angry at parents and make false accusations. You should, and this is where the thing is, you should give comfort to a victim that they have the ability to come forward.
Yeah.
And believe them enough to listen with an open mind about whether the accusation is correct. But you've got to preserve the presumption of innocence as well. And this is a conflict where maybe for many years we protected the presumption of innocence too much, but now we are throwing presumption of innocence down the tube too much. And where as a society do we draw this line? And the whole essence behind the presumption of innocence is we would prefer guilty people to go free than innocent people to go to jail. That's why the presumption of innocence exists. And when people say, I don't know that I agree with that in child abuse cases, I just say, well, just think about this for a second. What if you are the victim of the false accusation?
Yeah.
And we're not saying a guilty person getting away with it. We're saying an innocent person having their life destroyed as well. Right. And I don't think as a society we've reopened that discussion about where the proper balance is between presumption of innocence and believing a victim.
To go back to Kevin Spacey, though, for a moment, do you think it would have been a different outcome, perhaps, if he hadn't been gay and the accusations would have been made by women?
No, I don't think so, because we had a similar case here in Australia. A guy named Craig McLaughlin, who was starring in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, was accused by one of the women that he was feeling her up on stage. These accusations were disproved. Okay. He subsequently tried to get another acting role and has been drummed out of it.
Yeah. Because I was just going back to that theory we talked about earlier about teacher, a female teacher, because sadly, a lot of times they like to think, well, he's 14, he's 15, he's a boy. Oh, he got to be a man now. So what's the big deal? They don't want to look at a male as a victim. And I know working with the murdered and missing Indigenous people, I've worked with an advocate, which is well known, Lissa Yellowbird Chase, and she really shared with me is the boys actually are also victims, and sometimes they get more money for getting a boy, and because sometimes we always look at and think of the female victims and we don't think of the male victims. So she's really educated me in that, is looking at the male victims, and they go through their life, they might get addiction issues, they might go down a criminal path because they are confused over what's happened. And so that's why I was just kind of wondering if perhaps with Kevin Spacey, I mean, the man's a great actor, little odd, but hey, aren't we all? But you just wonder if it had been a female. I was just kind of wondering if that could have been it.
Yeah, there's so many issues that are going on in society at the moment. Let me ask you a question that seems unrelated.
Okay.
When we talk about trans rights and trans in sports, there are a lot of people talking about trans women, born biological male, transitioning to female.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Who's talking about trans men, born woman transitioning to male? Now, in my family, my stepmother's cousin was born male, became female, and another member of my family was born female, became male. And totally open with it, totally supportive, totally agree. Just got to remember the new name and remember the pronouns. Now, the one who was born female who transitioned to male, as a female, was incredibly successful on the sporting field. Now, as a trans male, it isn't able to compete, can't compete, never will be able to compete. And someone born trans male, and we've seen this in swimming. Now, I used to be a swimming coach. I used to be a competitive swimmer, and I was assistant national coach to the Pakistan swim team at one point, mainly looking after the females. So I have a big passion about female participation in sport. And I happen to believe that someone who has gone through male puberty will always have an unfair, unnatural advantage if competing against females. And I don't quite understand why that's a radical statement.
I don't either.
So part of the solution, part of the solution now is, okay, why don't we create, FINA, the International Swimming Body, so why don't we create a new category for open? So you have males, you have females, you have open, so you allow trans men to compete. I'm like, yeah, okay. Trans women to compete, born male, become female. Who's talking about the trans women, the born female became male, the trans men having a right to compete? Where are we creating their competition? So when you raise issues like Kevin Spacey being gay as opposed to an attack against female, I go even further. Why is the whole LGBTQI plus debate, when they start to talk about trans rights, only protecting people who go from male to female as if we converted one, as if we've got one, but they're not protecting protecting people that started female and ended male, because that's one that's lost. And I start to go, there's no similarity, no commonality between LGBTQI plus. And I say, why don't we just short circuit and call it -H? And people are like, what the hell is -H? I'm like, everything except heterosexual. And then they get upset, and I'm like, no. What are you excluding from LGBTQI plus except H, and creating a false dichotomy about a commonality which doesn't exist, as opposed to actually empowering every group to assert their own rights?
Now, see, here with the Indigenous community, they're called two spirits.
Yeah, and similar here, and similar. You look at some cultures around Thailand, Cambodia, Philippines, the acceptance of she-males, lady boys, they're called in some community. And in Thailand, which was against gay marriage but has gender neutral toilets in primary schools. So some cultures are far in advance of ours in accepting people with a sexual identity fluidity. And I think we should be able to accept sexual identity fluidity.
Well, I people like to think.
Hang on, but it's come back to my core golden rule: consenting adult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
I agree with that.
I hardly know a teenager that isn't questioning some aspect of their identity and sexuality.
Oh, definitely.
So don't make a permanent decision until you're over 18.
Yeah, and I don't think they should have access to hormones. I mean, I think they should wait till, like you said, they're a consenting adult and make the decision then, because you do hear of cases where perhaps they feel like someone's talked them into something. And they don't feel that way anymore, and then decisions were made that are hard to come back from. So
see, now we've said enough. In the last 3 minutes, we have said enough to piss everybody off.
Well, why not?
Everyone will find something in what we've just said to annoy them. Trans rights activists, gay rights, whatever, they could quite happily chop and paste this and go, well, they're homophobic, they're anti-trans, they're this or they're that, and they keep on missing the phrase, consenting adults can do whatever the hell they like.
Well, my gay sister would have not had an issue with what I said.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to see sport change. So you've got born male competing as male, born female competing as female, born male competing as female, born female competing as male. Create 4 categories. I would have no problem with that. I had a gay activist friend of mine, his boyfriend actually, come to me and say, you're being exclusionary. And I'm like, how is creating a new category being exclusionary, right? I'm a competitive swimmer. I won the silver medal for the 200 meters butterfly at the World Masters Games in 2002. Now, that's Masters competition. Could I compete against a 20-year-old? No, I couldn't. They're going to beat me every single day. But if you put me in a category in my age group, I'm up there.
Right.
So creating the category of old people lets me compete even further. It's not exclusionary, it's inclusory. People with physical disabilities would never have been able to compete against able-bodied people. So we created the Paralympics. We created categories. That didn't exclude people from competing.
Yeah.
That
Gave them a chance.
People.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's the tantamount to the same situation with the PGA Tour versus the Champions Tour.
Exactly. So if you created 2 new categories for, your standard male competing as male, female competing as male, born male competing as female, born female competing as male, you're including people and including even more than the LGBTQI plus activists call for, because they're just calling for born men to compete as female. They are silent about born female competing as male.
Yeah.
Why is it that they are silent about born female competing as male? Why are only trans women important to them and not trans men?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't even thought about it. And I have a friend who's actually
about trans female, born male, transition to female. Why? The other way around. I got myself confused. Why are people so silent about trans men, born female, transition to men? Why? Why are those people overlooked?
Yeah. And why aren't they out there shouting? Well, I think here in the States, if you're any different than a white male right now, you don't have a voice in the US. It's just people are scared. People are very scared.
You know what really disappoints me is we are undermining good collaborative relationships between the genders. The fear of a false accusation, I've got to underline false here. Yeah, look, false accusations are rare, but they're real. And when they happen, they're devastating. So a lot of my middle-aged male friends just will not mentor females anymore.
I don't blame them.
They're not scared of the real accusation, because if you've done the crime, do the time. They're scared of the false accusation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how the false accusation will derail. And the other thing I'm scared of now is, where do people date nowadays? Because either in the workplace or in your academic institution, right? These are the places that you meet most people. And this is where, in the past, most genuine, loving relationships started and flowered and grew.
Right.
But we still have in our society, the man is supposed to make the first move. You know, that's reducing,
Right.
but it's still highly expected in our society. But now the risk of making the first move and getting it wrong isn't just the embarrassment and the heartache. It
It's
will
an
be a loss of your career or being, well, and
An
it's a loss of your
accusation.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people have been kicked out of university and have been fired for making an inappropriate advance. Now, some of those advances are creepy and horrible and a misuse of power, but many of them have just been a genuine interest in a proper relationship. So part of the reason dating apps are so powerful and so popular right now is because what does a dating app give you? A dating app gives you a track record of consent all the way through the process.
Right. And the only thing is you might end up on one of my true crime shows saying, well, they answered Tinder and they didn't put up some safeguards and we didn't see them again.
Yeah.
Because that, that happens a little too much. And so, yeah, but that's a good question because of the false accusations. There has to be, well, like I said, I think the penalty should be if you make an accusation and it's false and they can prove it, then you do the time. You do whatever time that person.
I think there's a lot of strength to that.
I think that's something that we all need to start talking about and pushing because that
So to
just
come
makes
back
sense.
to come back to positive again.
Okay.
To come back to positive again, because we've been going in a lot of different avenues, but one thing I would say to your listeners, let's come back to abuse and trafficking in the aid industry in the UN.
Yeah.
We're developing a tool where we can prove a subset of victims.
Okay.
Women and children between the age of puberty and menopause that get pregnant and keep the child. That's a tiny subset. So your listeners who may be interested in donating to charities and supporting foreign aid and start to ask, well, what do I now do? You're telling me this stuff. You're spinning my mind. You're telling me Save the Children and UNICEF harbor pedophiles, which they do. What do I do? What's the question I need to ask an organisation before I donate money to? And the question you should ask an organisation before you donate money to them is this. How many of your staff have you reported to police and seen through to a conviction for child abuse? Because if your answer is 0, that you've reported none have been convicted, then that tells me you're not taking the issue seriously. You're pretending it's not happening.
Right.
You think you've got this magic wand where you've been able to filter through your human resources systems, all the predators, and none have made it through the net. That is frog shit. There's no way that can be done. So actually, what you want to hear from the aid agency is we have reported this many and this many have been convicted.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, the higher the number, the more confidence you can have in the agency. So if you're wanting to donate to Save the Children or UNICEF or any other charity out there, and you go to them and say, how many of your staff have you reported for an overseas child sex offence? If their answer is 0, do not give them money.
Okay.
The higher the number, the more you give them. And it sounds counterintuitive. So the higher amount that they're admitting to finding abusers in their staff, you should give them more money. Yeah, because they're finding abusers.
Right.
The ones with the low numbers are not even looking.
No.
True. Now, do you guys have this over in the UK or Australia? We've discovered they have a thing called SAM insurance.
Just mention that.
It's Doc, we think alike. We share a brain some days. They have SAM insurance for schools and churches, which is for sexual assault coverage.
Yeah, we do. And I'm going to support it. You should have SAM insurance because look at it from the victim perspective now. So you have been victimized. The existence or otherwise of insurance isn't really going to stop an individual perpetrator. Any criminologist will tell you size of penalty doesn't deter crime, fear of detection does. when looking at through the lens of a victim should be able to get financial compensation and medical assistance compensation.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
So having insurance allows a victim to have an avenue to some recompense. But there's the other side of it. An insurance company is a profit-making company.
Exactly.
What insurance companies say to their insured is reduce your risk.
Yes.
You know, they want, like my health insurance in Australia, it gives me rewards for physical activity and getting health checks. And it gives me those rewards because it wants to actually reduce my risk. I actually think the insurance industry is the way we get the aid industry to change. That we actually show the insurance industry that the risk of sexual abuse is higher than that they're currently pricing in.
See,
And once my tool comes out and we show that the detection will increase, then claims against insurance will increase.
awesome.
So premiums will go up. So what the insurance will say to these agencies, you better fix this problem
Right.
or we're putting your premiums up. I actually think that's the golden key to solving the
Interesting.
problem. Because in the 1990s, when I was working for the Red Cross, there was an extremely high HIV infection rate
Right.
amongst foreign aid workers. Because you go to conflict zones, people bonk like rabbits, they go to parties, they get stuck in curfews, they get drunk. And when you're in war zones, stress relief comes one of two ways. Either you revert into yourself and become a really strong introvert, or you bonk like rabbits. And I'm an introvert, so I restricted into myself. But what the insurance companies saw is this massive increase in HIV infection rates and the consequent impact on medical insurance that came from that. And insurance companies said to the aid industry, who were at the time saying, oh, what people do in their own private life is their own business, so weren't giving us any training about HIV and interpersonal comportment behaviours. The insurance company said, unless you change your staff training, we won't insure you anymore. And that was the driver that got massive changes in pre-deployment training, which then saw HIV rates drop. So I wouldn't be opposing insurance. I, in fact, would be encouraging it, but I would then go to the insurance company and working with them about how do they lower their risk by going back to the insured organisation and say, what are you doing for prevention, detection and training to stop the abuse happening? Because if you don't do that, we're putting your premiums up.
Yeah. Because the only thing that we've heard here is that they're offering actually the victims little.
Yeah.
A little,
Very
hardly,
little. Yeah.
very little.
Yeah.
And that it's more
So you
of
fight them on it.
yeah. And I think
And you have to.
yeah. And I think that's a good thing, because these children, when they're abused, they're going to be in therapy probably for life. Some of them, they just don't get over it.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
They don't get
Without
over
a shadow
it.
of a doubt. They don't. And again, I've spent most of the last 5 years working with children born of abuse who have also been abused themselves. So it's not just the abused, it's the consequent flow on into the next generation.
Right.
That's why Daisy's law is so powerful.
Yeah.
Just imagine if your mother came to you and said, all your listeners, imagine this for a second. Your mother comes to you and says, actually, you're adopted. So you have some identity issues around that. That's not my mother. That's not my father. Or even worse, your father adopted you. I didn't. You're actually my child, but your father has accepted you as his child. Your father raped me when I was X years old. That's who your natural father is. So anyone who doesn't believe in multi-generational abuse, imagine if your mother told you that your father is not your father and that your biological father actually raped your mother.
Yeah.
Start to think about your own identity crisis, because you'll be saying to yourself, 50% of my DNA came from an abuser.
Yeah.
What does that make me?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and that's multi-generational trauma.
Well, and that's something that we talk about on this channel a lot with the Native community, because they do have, that trauma due to the residential schools. So many of their parents don't know how to parent. because
So my father worked in my father worked in the Indigenous communities in Australia in the 50s and 60s. So did my mother. And I have a lot of interest in the subject of Indigenous, non-Indigenous issues in Australia. I wrote an article back in about 1999, I think, somewhere around about there, maybe early 2000. And you can Google, if you Google protection must be colorblind, Andrew MacLeod, The Age. The Age is a newspaper in Melbourne. And it was an article about the contrast between Indigenous customs and laws and European cultural perspectives.
Right.
And it was positing that a child was promised to a man under Indigenous laws and customs. He's mid-30s or early 40s, has sex with the child. Do you prosecute him for rape under European law, or do you make her live with him under Indigenous law? And people said, oh, you're exaggerating. I'm like, I'm actually referring to a real case that happened in Queensland, where the girl actually ran away to live in a woman's refuge. And the man's excuse was it was traditional custom and practice. Now, we had this shameful policy in Australia in the 50s, 60s, going way back to the 30s and didn't end until the 70s, called the stolen generation, where mixed race children in Northern Territory and full-blood children in other states were forcibly removed from their parents to try to integrate them into European culture. Now, we look back on that and say an enormous amount of damage was done in those processes. And definitely multi-generational trauma was done as part of that. But one of the unintended consequences of the pushback now is that law enforcement and child protection are too scared to intervene in many Indigenous communities for fear of being accused of being a new stolen generation. So you've now got a horrible statistic where Indigenous females are 4 times more likely to attend hospitals in the Northern Territory of Australia with female rectal tear. Now, female rectal tear happens from a bad child birth or a violent rape. Mm-hmm. Now, there is no reason for Indigenous women and girls to attend with 4 times the rate of female rectal tear than non-Indigenous women, other than a higher amount of abuse, because the Indigenous biology doesn't make the rectum more vulnerable to rectal tear. Now, I say that and I can hear people now calling me a racist. And I'm like, what is racist about wanting to protect a female child? Which is why my article says protection must be colorblind.
Yeah. We
shouldn't give too much protection or too little protection because of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth and the dynamic is where we've got another conflict in communities like United States, Canada, Australia. How do we rightly protect elements of traditional customs, practice, laws, languages, but not allow that to be a false cover for abuse? And I say false cover for abuse, because I don't actually think there is anything in traditional customs and practices that allows you to knowingly abuse someone.
No, not here in the States. Trust me. The advocates that I've worked with, no, that they are very strong on that. There is nothing in the community that's supposed to be allowed, and they are really good on Facebook at calling it out when there's someone in the community that has perpetrated a crime against a child. The biggest problem we have here is that on the native lands, or the reservations, as we call them in the States, they're a sovereign land, most of them. And so they have, most of them have a police force. But if a white man commits a crime on the reservation, the police force that's native does not have the right to do anything. It's an interesting constitutional dilemma, because most people think the United States is a union of 50 states. And that's not what the Supreme Court's found. The Supreme Court has found it's a union of 50 states and a whole bunch of sovereign Indigenous tribes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the word sovereignty is really, really important, because when I was advising Rio Tinto on some of its land use negotiations with Indigenous tribes in Arizona, One of the things that Rio Tinto, the Australian mining company, has done is understood that if you treat Indigenous communities with respect and genuinely look at ways for economic development as part of a mining intervention in the community, you actually speed up the land use process, you improve profitability for the company, but you improve social outcomes for the community as well. So it really is a win-win. And we had ongoing disputes inside Rio Tinto between Australian executives and American executives, because Australian executives would say the Indigenous tribes are sovereign. Therefore, we treat them as a head of state,
Right.
as we would the president of Nauru or the president of China. Whereas the American executives found a really hard time wrapping their head around that. They're just like, well, the Indigenous groups are community groups. And we're like, no, they are sovereign peoples. And we've got a similar issue in Australia. We don't call Australian Indigenous people sovereign because they don't have legal sovereignty here as they do in the United States. But that doesn't remove from the fact that in 1788, when Australia was colonised by the European communities, Australia was more ethnically, linguistically, biologically and legally diverse than Western Europe was. The DNA is clear about the massive diversity between people on this continent. The linguistic diversity is huge, hundreds of different language groups. And one of the things that I think we get wrong sometimes is we talk about the Indigenous problem as if there's one. There's not. Every interaction between an Indigenous sovereign community
Right.
and Europeans is a different set of dynamics and issues. You know, the last group of Indigenous people to be so-called discovered in Australia, to make contact with a white man for the first time, guess when that was?
Was it that one group that was, oh, what was their name?
Guess which decade?
It wasn't that long ago.
It was 1984.
Yeah.
And my father, when he was a patrol officer in the remote areas of Australia, did what was then called 3 expeditions of first discovery. My father, made contact with people who didn't even know white man existed. Before I went and did my master's degree in the UK in the 90s, I wanted to travel to parts of Australia so no English person could say to me, I've been somewhere in your country that you haven't. And that gave me the great honour of sitting with some of the tribes that my father had worked with in the 60s. And I met old guys who did not know white men existed when they were teenagers.
Isn't that
So
amazing?
the cultural clash with remote communities in Australia is this generation. It's not history. It's this generation.
Yeah.
Whereas Indigenous people who lived around Sydney had that cultural clash in 1788.
Right.
So the issues confronting groups around Sydney Cove are extremely different to issues surrounding Indigenous Pintubi people from the Western Desert, for example. And one of the problems that we have when we're looking at Indigenous issues is we think there is one, and there's not. It's far more complex than that.
I came across that when I was doing a show on the residential schools. And one of the girls had made the comment, she said she was a Pima Indian. And she said, when I came to the residential school, I found out there were other Indians, other tribes. She didn't know that, you know, and she said they thought they were going to take the Indian out of us. She said what they did is they actually brought us together, that we learned there were other tribes. We taught the songs to the children when we could. We told the stories when we could. So here you thought you were bringing these children in to make them become white and get rid of the Indian. And what they did was they showed them that they had more power together, which was amazing.
So let me again start to wrap up with a phrase.
Yeah.
And I use this phrase when talking about foreign affairs, but actually it can be used when talking about most sociological issues and political issues like this. The phrase I use in foreign affairs is this: if the answer seems simple, it's not the answer. It's always more complex than it appears on the surface. Like when people say the Iraq war was about oil. No, it wasn't. It's far more complex than that. And, you know, the answer to the Indigenous issue is this. If it's a simple answer, no, it's not the answer. In the United States, Canada and Australia, housing prices are going up and it's hard for the next generation. Oh, so the answer is this. No, it's not. It's far more complex than that. And human beings don't like nuance and they don't like going through a series of interacting moral dilemmas and conflicts where you've got to, the old phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You've got to take some good and some compromise in everything that you're doing. Or another phrase that I work or I use when I work, because I've spent a lot of time in the developing world and a lot of time in really nasty parts in the world, and that's this. You don't make the world better by working with good people and keeping them good. You make the world better by working with bad people and making them less bad. And the number of people that say, how can you possibly work with those people? They're evil. Yeah, they are. And you make them less evil, and that's how you make the world better. That's why I negotiated with Milosevic. That's why I spent time with Kagame. That's why I spent time with Pervez Musharraf, because within their cultural context, you change what's going on. And in fact, most of the people that we look at as bad are not actually bad. They're just in a very different cultural context that we haven't understood, which is another phrase that I like, which is, I've been to every country in the world except one, and I'm going to go to that shortly. And my lesson is this: everyone in the world wants the same thing. They want a better future for their children.
Yeah.
They just have a different definition of the word better.
Yep.
That's very profound. I like that. That's very true. Well, I've kept you late, and I hope we can talk again, Professor MacLeod.
Yeah,
I have really enjoyed this. I think it's going to give our audience a lot to think about. A lot of questions to ask, checking into what charities that they are volunteering for. Hopefully it'll scare a few guys that have been to foreign countries and have done unquestionable things, that they might one day have a knock on their door and see you or their children. And
or as I say to people, I might not get you this year. I might not get you next year. It might be on your 80th birthday that I come knocking on your door. But
there you
go. I'm sorry, guys. If you have knowingly put your erect penis inside a vagina without a condom on, you knew there is a risk that you might be a father. And that's going to come out one day. And it might not be on your 80th birthday. It might be after you die. Because the one thing for sure is, I think at some time in the relatively near future, DNA sampling will be part of our passports. I think the world's heading that direction. Whether you like it or not, I know it's going to scare a lot of people. The moment that comes out, people's family trees become clear. And everybody has a skeleton in their closet if you go back 2 generations or more.
Oh, I think
So
you're right.
you might have got away with it, but I can tell you one thing: one of your grandchildren is going to get a call from someone in another country and say, "I am your cousin."
Yeah.
And then, even after you're dead, that's when people will find out you're a predator.
Yeah.
So if you're tempted to do it, don't. You will be caught.
Yep, you will.
Just a matter of time.
Maybe next time we can discuss what we should do with predators, because that's a whole other subject. What's a fitting sentence for predators?
So look up, I'll leave you with this taster. Look up the law in Madagascar.
Madagascar.
And if you get caught abusing a child under the age of 10, the penalty is physical castration, not chemical castration.
Well, you know, Louisiana has said that they're going to do that with a predator.
I mean, the thing is, and this is why I go back to something I said really, really early on, you know, pedophilia is not a sickness. It's a hardwiring in the brain that's wrong.
Right.
If you say it's a sickness, you think it can be cured and detected. It cannot be detected. No. It cannot be cured.
No, I agree.
Hmm.
I totally agree. And we have to protect the children.
That having been said, the nuance on it is if someone is a predatory pedophile and knows they're attracted to that and doesn't try to resist it and seeks out children and abuses it again and again, we do everything we can for that person. But what about the person who has a predilection towards pedophilia, recognizes it as wrong, and is trying everything they can do to resist it? Because one of the expressions I also use is having a sexual attraction is not a moral decision. Acting upon the sexual attraction is. And to put it in simple context, if I'm sitting around with a couple of guys at a cafe and a good-looking girl walks by and we think, oh, that's a nice ass, that's the sexual attraction.
Right.
Do we stand up and feel the ass? No, we don't. That's resisting the attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to differentiate between having the attraction and acting upon it. So if someone recognizes the attraction and acts upon it, yes, we crack down. But what if they have the physical attraction and try to resist it? And one thing we don't do in our community is help those people resist the attraction that they're going to have to fight against all their life.
Yeah.
In fact, in some jurisdictions, we make it compulsory for psychologists to mandatory report those people. So we actually create a disincentive for someone who's trying to resist the attraction from seeking help in doing so.
It's true.
So there's a whole lot to unpack on that one. Because if the government provided funding to psychologists to help predators resist the temptation, the media will report that as the government is helping pedophiles.
Right.
Now, the government's not helping pedophiles. The government's helping children by helping the pedophile resist the temptation.
Right.
That's not how our community would discuss it. That's not how our media would talk about it. That's not how the social media world will go nuts. So let's save that one for another discussion because I actually do have to go to a meeting in 25 minutes time and it's about 20 minutes walk from here.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Professor MacLeod, thank you for the privilege of getting to chat with you, and we'll do it again soon. Okay.
I look forward to it.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night. Good afternoon.
It's just past midday, so yes.
Okay.
Okay. Goodbye.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, Doc. That was awesome, wasn't it? Can you hear me?
Yep. That was awesome.
It was. Quickly, let's go into our missing people and then we'll wind things up. So remember these faces when you're on any kind of public transit or at the store. Stay alert to your surroundings. We know human trafficking and missing people's cases happen everywhere, and victims can be hidden in plain sight. The person you see might be someone's missing family member. Some people may disappear voluntarily and then later end up in a dangerous situation where they can't get away. Others never had a choice. So if you recognize someone from today's cases or witness something suspicious, contact the authorities. Don't assume someone else will call. Your vigilance could save a life. And alternative reporting, if you have a reason that you're scared to contact the police, go ahead and email us. We have a specific email. It's called tips, 4, trialjunkiesunited@gmail.com. We'll pass along the tip. We have no problem with that. But our first person that we're going to talk about is Clarence Wadsworth. He's 14, and Channing Small Eyes. She's 13. Now, we had discussed Channing Small Eyes before with her sibling, and her sibling was found. But now they're saying that these two have actually are together. So as of September 11th, 2025, that was the last time they were seen at the Blood Reserve, Alberta, Canada location. And the reserve is what they call their reservations. Clarence Wadsworth has brown hair and brown eyes. He's 6'1" and 140 pounds. He is, and then Channing Small, her eyes are described as brown and her hair is brown. She's 5'7" and 140 pounds. The Blood Tribe Police continue to search for Clarence and Channing since September 11th. They were from the Moses Lake area on the Blood Reserve. They're known to frequent Lethbridge, Karsten, Calgary, and Edmonton. So if anyone has any information, please call the Blood Tribal Police at 403-737-3800 or contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Now, the next person is Doreen Warbonnet. She's 52. She's been missing since September 30th from Rapid City, South Dakota. Brown hair and brown eyes. She's 5'8", 230 pounds. And the Rapid City Police Department, if you know anything, contact them at 605-394-4131. They said Doreen was last seen wearing a black shirt and blue jeans. She has tattoos on her right wrist and her left wrist and the fingers of her left hand. Doreen also has some scars on her forehead and her right hand, and she may be utilizing a cane. So if you spot her, call that number or 911. Next, we have Faith Cleveland. She's 13. She was last seen yesterday in Ryan Lane in Gallup, New Mexico. She's 5 foot, weighs 90 pounds, brown eyes and brown hair. They don't know what she was wearing last. She was last seen around 7 p.m. at the Hillcrest Trailer Park. So if you see her or know Faith's whereabouts, please contact 505-722-2002 at the Gallup Police Department or at 505-863-9365. Those are the two locations to contact.
As bad as this situation is with her missing like that, I have to give kudos to the Gallup Police Department and everybody involved in that situation, because it was just yesterday.
Yeah, and that's a good point. They're jumping right on it. So
Yeah.
let's hope they get her found. This is Tashina Looking Glass. She's been missing since September 22nd. They do not have a lot of information on Tashina. This was from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. She was last seen on that 22nd. She was being discharged from the Deaconess Hospital. They said she has no vehicle, so she would be on foot, but she requires medication, and they're really concerned. So if you know anything, contact the Oklahoma City Police Department at 405-231-2121. They need to get more information on Tashina.
Hmm.
But so this concludes our interview.
Well, our first interview anyway.
Yeah, our first interview.
We're hoping we're going to do more.
Because he was a delight to talk to. He really was. He made me do a lot of thinking, and I hope you guys did some too, because I think he gave us some very good things to ponder and opine upon. He made me rethink SAM insurance. The thought that it could actually be a key to catching some of these predators. You know, like I think it was either Irish Amy or Fowler said, you hit him in the pocketbook. Hey,
Yeah.
that's where you're going to get them.
And depending on the situation of the business or whatever, asking the right questions. If the insurance company asks the right questions, how many pedophilia people have you whistleblowed on? Prosecuted. Well, maybe your premiums are going to go up or down depending on that. You know.
Yeah.
And if that could happen, it, like he said, it could be a positive.
Exactly. And I hadn't thought about that before, so that made me really think. But truth seekers, we hope you gained as much from this conversation as Doc and I did. Professor MacLeod sharing his knowledge, his real hands-on experience with what's happening to the innocent children. I know the mods have put out the Hear Their Cries. So make sure you check out that organization that he has co-started, because this needs to be talked about, change perspectives. It saves lives. His organization is really helping neglected children. And we're all looking forward to more knocks on the door.
Mm-hmm.
But Professor MacLeod is ensuring that these children's voices are finally heard. and he gave us a lot to think about. So I'm so appreciative that you guys were here so that we could share this information, and let's get it out there. Let's make sure other people see it. We can't wait to chat with him again, and he has decades of experience and wisdom to share with us. He's made travels, like he said, he's got one place left to go. So we're honored he took the time to speak with us. And I can't say how much I appreciated what he's done. And that's a picture of him at the Antarctic. But just remember, guys, that before we bring this home, every killer depends on your silence. Please don't give it to them. If you know something, speak up, because that wasn't a mannequin. It never is. Remember, someone knows something. Someone always does. Silence is betrayal. And if you have a story that you think needs attention, contact us, email us. Every Thursday night, we honor our Indigenous and Native brothers and sisters. We share their stories so that no one is forgotten. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us tonight. If you enjoy our work, you can buy us a coffee, but only if you're able. If your funds are tight, support us by commenting, hitting that like button, sharing, subscribing. Those things make the algorithms work. So until next time, remain informed and stay compassionate. Keep seeking truth and keep demanding justice, you guys, and never stop speaking up. We love you all. We'll see you Thursday for our next MMIP show edition. Ciao. Love ya.
In shadows where the innocent fall, behind closed doors beyond the walls, silent voices, stolen years, we stand together, face their fears. A world that has turned away for too long, but now we to make things right. Hear their cries across nations, breaking chains of devastation. With diplomacy and justice strong, we'll fight until the darkness is gone. Awareness illuminates the way forward. For every tear shed, justice and truth will emerge. We listen to their cries. Training those who guard the gate, teaching them how to investigate, bringing nations and advocates together, building networks that last forever, setting wrongs to right, prosecution for those who cause harm, reaching out with open arms. Hear their cries throughout the nations, breaking free from destruction. With diplomacy and justice firmly established, we'll keep fighting until the darkness clears. Awareness lights the way ahead. For every tear shed, justice and truth will come to light. We hear and listen to their cries. For the brave who dare to speak, whistleblowers strong, not weak. We lobby, advocate, and stand as a shield of safety in our hands. When the world finally understands, genuine change begins to flow. Data speaks and hearts awaken for every child's priceless say. Hear their cries.